Few adventure games actually feature much adventure. It's a curious name for this, the most languid and cerebral of genres, but Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis is a rare exception. Like the movies that inspired it and the adventure serials that inspired them, it's an exciting, rip-roaring, globe-trotting adventure in the truest sense, and it's remarkable how they managed to squeeze this much energy out of a pretty standard point-and-click adventure game. The myth at the heart of this original Indiana Jones story is, as the title suggests, the fabled lost city of Atlantis. In 1939, on the eve of World War II, Indy finds a mysterious Atlantean artifact in the vast, unorganized collection of the college he teaches at between expeditions. But, as is often the case at the beginning of an Indiana Jones story, the artifact is snatched away from him by Klaus Kerner, a pistol-wielding agent of the Third Reich. The Nazis have taken a special interest in the Atlantis myth, in particular a mystery metal that is said to generate an incredible amount of energy the Nazis want to turn into a nuclear weapon. And so Indy embarks on a dangerous quest to stop them because, as we know from The Last Crusade, he really hates Nazis. Despite coming out well before some of LucasArts' most famous games, Fate of Atlantis is one of the most innovative point-and-click adventures the company ever released. There's the IQ scoring system, which awards you bonus points if your solution to a puzzle is particularly imaginative. And some of the puzzle solutions are randomized too, making the game more replayable than most. But my favourite feature, which also adds to its replayability, is how the game is split into 3 distinctly flavoured paths: Fists, Wits, and Team. Early in the game, Indy teams up with Sophia Hapgood, a self-professed psychic medium who claims to be in contact with the spirit of an Atlantean king. Sophia has echoes of Marion Ravenwood from Raiders of the Lost Ark. She's tough, resourceful, and quick-witted, regularly putting Indy in his place. If you choose the team path, you spend the rest of the game with Sophia, solving puzzles together, trading barbs, and occasionally taking control of her. For me, this is the most enjoyable way to play the game, simply because the interactions between the 2 characters are so much fun. The dialogue is sharp and funny, and some of the puzzles involving both characters are well designed. But if you'd prefer to go solo, the Wits path sees Indy chasing Atlantis on his own with trickier puzzles and, of course, less dialogue. You'll visit many of the same locations in both paths, but they feel quite different. Then, finally, there's the more action-focused Fists path, which is the one I would avoid, if only because it forces you to endure the game's terrible fighting minigames more often. One of the game's greatest strengths is capturing the pulpy adventure feel of the films, but within the fairly rigid confines of a 90s point-and-click adventure. One of the ways it does this is by never lingering in one location for too long. In the first couple of hours, you'll have visited New York City, Monte Carlo, Iceland, Guatemala, and the Azores. The constantly changing scenery makes for an energetic and fast-paced game. It looks fantastic too. The art is pretty low resolution by modern standards, and even compared to other LucasArts adventures released only a few years later. But each country Indy visits has a rich and distinctive atmosphere, tied together by a tastefully understated colour palette. The character animation is wonderfully lively and expressive too, perfectly capturing the scrappy, rough-and-tumble action of Spielberg's movies. But there are times when the game slips hopelessly into 90s adventure game absurdity, which dampens the feeling of being Indiana Jones somewhat. One puzzle involves peeling some chewed gum off a school desk and then sticking it to the bottoms of your shoes. Why? To walk up a coal chute, of course. Fate of Atlantis is easy to get running on modern PCs thanks to its availability on digital platforms such as Steam and GOG. If you're into adventure games, it's a must-play. The randomized elements, IQ system, and multiple paths with the story set it apart from other, more straightforward adventure games of the era.